Let's go ahead and get started. Thanks for coming in on President's Day. Sorry we couldn't get the day off for you. First thing I wanted to do is talk about Class 6, which will be our on-camera exercises. And I wanted to see if we could assign roles for that. I know I haven't reminded you of that. I think I wrote it in the syllabus that we would try to do it today. If we need to discuss it a little bit, we can. If you need some more time, we can talk about that. But essentially, there is a video conference scenario with, I think, 5 or so different roles. There's an option you can do a press conference at, I think, at least one scenario where you'll give a press conference, or you could be a reporter at a press conference. You could also explain this statistics graph over Skype. You could also practice an on-camera interview if you want to do some preparation for that and think about how you would give an on-camera interview and think about the topic, and there's a process for that. So let me start by seeing if you have any questions on that, and we'll deal with those first, and then we'll see if we can assign roles so you can begin thinking about what you're going to do to prepare for this Class 6. So any questions first off? Okay, so let's look at, has anyone had a chance to look through these roles yet? Yes. Raise your hand if you looked at the roles at all. A little bit, okay, one person. All right, we'll see how this goes. Should we try to assign roles now, or do you want to come back next week? This is what, week 3? Yeah, so this is going to be in 2 weeks, right? On camera is going to be in 2 weeks. Hold on a second. Let me check that. All right, so today is the 15th. Yeah, today is the 15th, Class 3. And the on-camera workshop will be Class 6, but that's only 2 weeks from today, February 29th. So let's try to go through these roles, see if I can assign people to the roles. If that doesn't work, we can maybe come back at the end after you've had a chance to think about it, and we can do some adjustments next week if necessary. So, with that said, let me go through the roles. So the first scenario is this video conference scenario. There are 5 different roles. There's a person who's going to play the VP of, I'm on page 9 of the syllabus, who's going to play the VP of annuity processing. There's the head of annuity processing. There's the project manager. There's the annuity salesperson. And there's the IT person. So, do I have a volunteer to play the VP of annuity processing and sales? I know you haven't read the scenario, but you'll read the company background, and then you'll prepare, and then during the exercise you'll say more sales, or less IT problems, or something like that, and try to communicate to someone else who's in a different room over Skype while we all watch from the comfort of this room. Okay, now, fantastic. All right. Head of annuity processing. Okay. Yeah. Project manager. That'd be excellent. Head of annuity sales. All right. Sorry, second. Yes. Second. IT person. Yes, Jared. Fantastic. All right. Next scenario is this graph where you'll explain the statistical graph. Is anyone familiar with this graph created by Charles Menard, which depicts Napoleon's Russian campaign in 1812? It's actually a very important development in statistics, where you see this graph of Napoleon's forces marching to Russia and then retreating from Russia, and you see the line getting smaller. And there's some interesting things about what that did for statistics. And there's also some very interesting things about the story of this invasion and how you can see this on the graph. So Has anyone seen that graph before? Let's start with that. Is anyone excited about statistics or war stories?
Yeah, that sounds actually quite exciting.
Okay, you can do two. Why don't you, who else raise their hand? Does I see another hand? Okay, Levy, why don't you and Jenny do that one? And it's well, if it ends up being too much work for you, Levy, we'll figure it out. Okay, the next is on-camera interviews. So this is a chance for you to practice an actual interview. You'll pick the topic, you'll make up some questions, I'll pair you with someone who's going to be the interviewer, and you'll just get a chance at seeing what you look like on camera, practicing some of the eye contact and other techniques that we go over in class. So you will be responsible for picking a subject and presenting some questions, and then the interviewer may throw you a curveball or two. It'll be a fun, intense experience. Would anyone like to do an on-camera interview? Priya? Excellent. All right, Priya is top one. Anyone else? Okay, would anyone like to be the interviewer? This will be an easier job. Maybe if you're doing something else, you can also do the interviewer. Priya will provide you with some questions. You'll familiarize yourself with that and maybe think of one little gem to kind of add to it and throw it off. Okay. The next is actually we only have one press conference scenario. This is where we will have one person play the chairman of BP after this big oil spill that happened in 2010. And there's a script you will read with the press conference. We're sorry, we spilled all this oil, we care about the people, that kind of thing. And then we'll have some reporters ask you some questions, and you'll use the techniques to answer hostile questions during a press conference. To respond to those, and we'll have a system where you get to see yourself on camera and evaluate it that way. Is there a volunteer to be Carl Henrik Sandberg? Yes, Josh. Okay. Josh. Would anyone like to play an annoying reporter? Yes. Okay, anyone else? Reporter? Frank. Okay, does everyone have a role? Oh, what's your name, by the way? Yeah. What's that? Oh, you can be a reporter? Okay, good. And what's your name? Oh, Win-Win. Okay, good. I can check in after class if there's anything you missed and whatnot. Okay. Reporter, wait a minute. So does everyone else have something? You need something. What do you want to do? You want to do an on-camera interview? You want to join the statistical graph team? What's that?
Yeah. He's a little bit late.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So, what did I think of for this? Eric, you want to do an on-camera interview?
Yes.
Maybe a little more of an ambitious project, but you want to do it? Okay. Excellent. Okay. And Win-Win, can we have you interview Eric? Okay. And then when Yana gets, you don't have a role. So do you want to do this help with the statistical graph? Okay. What's that? Okay. Do you want to be the project manager for the conference call? Okay. All right. So Levy will not be on the conference call. Helen will be on the conference call. That you can concentrate on the statistical graph. And everyone has a role, right? Okay. And one other detail. Let's see. So for the conference call, does Natalie, Yang, Helen, do you use Skype? Did any of the three of you use Skype? You have an active, Yang, you have an active Skype account? Okay, can you bring, you have your laptop, so that's your laptop, right?
Yes.
Okay, so on the day of the workshop, I'll have you go to a different room, log into Skype, and that's all good, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then Sagnick, Jerry, and Jerry, where's Sagnick and Jerry. Do you two have Skype? Either of you have Skype? You have Skype and you have a laptop?
I have a laptop in my apartment.
Oh, can you bring it to class 2 weeks from today?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so you'll bring it to class and you'll log into your Skype account, and that's all good. And same question for Levy and Johnny. So one of you have Skype? Okay, you have Skype, so you will bring your laptop, log into Skype, fantastic.
So all of these are done at the start.
Yes, the first two, the video conference with the annuity processing people will be done over Skype. The statistical graph will be done over Skype. And the camera interviews will be done in here, and we may have something on the big screen similar to the press conference. I'm not exactly sure how we're going to do that, but we'll figure that out. Okay. And then so Yang is in charge of Skype. Sagnick is also in charge of Skype. Okay. Good. Fantastic. All right. So let's. Then we have one other logistical thing which we'll talk about with your technical presentations, which we'll do a couple of them next week. But I'm going to hold off on that logistical discussion until after we do the technical data discussion. So with that, I'm going to start in with our technical data workshop. All right, so this is a few hours in presenting technical data, thinking about how you might present numbers, graphs, anything that might confuse your audience, some skills that we can use to make that more effective presentation. First, we'll talk about the definition. What is technical data? Second, we'll revisit our objective and conclusion discussion, because when you're presenting something complicated, the last thing you want to do is forget that you're trying to accomplish an objective, and the last thing you want to do is forget that you're using powerful conclusions to accomplish that. You don't want to get wrapped up in the numbers just because it gets a little more tough, okay? We'll talk about some pointers on PowerPoint design. We'll also talk about this idea of what I call PowerPoint competition, which means the PowerPoint slide is competing for attention with you. So you're the speaker, you're trying to talk. The PowerPoint itself is demanding attention, and you want to keep the focus on you, how you can avoid that confusion, that distraction. So, how you can make that work. We'll talk about transitions, going from one subject to another. Nothing earth-shattering, just some basics to keep your audience with you. Visual aids, graphs, pie charts, bar charts, how you can present those, how you can decide which ones to use. Jargon, definitions, technical terms that might confuse your audience, how to identify that in your presentation, and how to eliminate it. We'll go through a quick exercise. Content enhancements, just a few things to spruce up your presentation. We could do this really at any point. It doesn't have to be technical data, but we'll include it at this point because it helps to have interesting things in your presentation when you're going through a lot of technical type stuff, and because you're going to be doing a full presentation next week, so a few ideas to help you with that. Then we will talk about your technical presentation assignments. See if you have any questions on that. I'll let you know how that's going to work because there's a little kink with our snow day and how I did the scheduling. And then we will do our team graph presentations. I gave you some data and told you just to take a quick look at it with your teammates. I will give you another 15-20 minutes to wrap things up after we do the discussion so you can think about incorporating some of the techniques we go over today and how you want to present that. And then we'll have each of the three groups come up and make a presentation. So, with that, we'll start off with the definition of technical data. And I'll just throw it out. The definition I want us to work with is anything that might confuse your audience. I'm going to ask you in a minute what sort of presentations you do, but I don't want to get confused on anything there. This could be numbers, statistical charts. This could be complicated definitions, complicated language. You tell me, what else could be a technical data type of presentation that you've either seen, heard of, something you do in your jobs, where you might be able to use some skills to make it clearer for your audience?
Discussing IT terminology.
Yeah, fantastic. Work with a lot of IT people. And if the more IT people can communicate effectively with the audience, the more the audience likes that IT person, the more unusual it is and the more valuable that IT person is. Someone who can talk in the IT language and communicate effectively with the lay audience, that person is golden. Anything else? Yes?
Discuss investment ideas.
What? Investment. And investment ideas. So you're going to be talking to, I think you mentioned in your discussion or your presentation last week in your paper that you want to be able to bring your knowledge as an investment analyst to people who don't have time or knowledge. And if you do say things that are going to confuse them while you're trying to get them to invest, are they going to say, oh, that person confused me, they must be really smart, I'll give her a bunch of money? She knows stuff that I don't know because I got lost? Is that what they're going to say? No, they're going to say, "This. I don't have any idea what this person's talking about. It makes me feel like, whatever, it makes me feel lost. I want to give my money to somebody who has it simple, who has a simple way of making me understand." Second.
Research and development data.
Yes, yes. Great idea, great point. Anything else? All right, so good. Those are some of the things we can use these types of skills for. And again, those and anything else that your audience might not understand. So, objective. Remember we talked about when you're giving a presentation, you want to have a purpose, an objective. And the very last thing you want to do when you start talking about numbers is think that your objective is to just go over the numbers. We talked about we don't want to retreat to you explaining the numbers and you thinking that that's what's important. What you're trying to accomplish with your audience is still the most important thing. Any graphs, any statistical analysis, that stuff is just a tool to give your audience what they need. And again, we talked about how objective forces us to try, use these numbers, use this data to try to accomplish this objective. Watch your audience, monitor, make sure they're understanding. If they're not understanding, don't just keep firing numbers at them. Adjust. Quick review, we just want to make sure we don't forget that. And the key thing we use to accomplish our objective, conclusions. We talked about conclusions being the important building blocks, conclusions being supported by premises. And when you're looking through your technical presentation, you can think about, is this a conclusion? Is this a premise? Or is this something that should not be in my presentation? Worst thing you want to do is go over something complicated that confuses your audience when there's really no purpose for your audience to know that or understand that. So again, conclusions, premises are the building blocks and the things we want to focus our content around. We have some ways of presenting conclusions, verbally, non-verbally, which we went over in class 1. And we add them all up. And when you're talking about something that's confusing to your audience, it can make a huge difference. So I'm standing behind this lectern, going over some numbers, some data, some statistics, and then I use these conclusion presentation techniques. I pause, I come out from behind the lectern, slow my rate of speech down, I click to the next slide that says the conclusion is. How would that make you feel as an audience member? I care about communicating this to you, that I'm not going to just run numbers at you. Add all these little things up that can really help your audience understand, and really make your audience feel relaxed. Maybe they're worried about these concepts you're throwing at them, and they see you as the person guiding them through. All these techniques, which we went over in class 1, very helpful added up. And we went over the same thing with how you present premises, verbally, non-verbally. The one main thing with premises, we talked about this idea of a presentation motif, which could be as simple as listing premise 1, premise 2, premise 3. It's a recurring physical or verbal action, which indicates parallel structure in your presentation and guides your audience through. And a number of you used a presentation motif effectively in your presentation last week. So, those are the basics of the conclusion review. And remember, we talked about this thing we call the attention retention curve based on the beginning, middle, and end of your presentation. Who can sum that up for us? Tell us what's the takeaway of the audience's level of attention at the beginning, middle, and end. Yes?
Pretty much illustrates how the beginning and the end of your presentation is where your audience's attention is like heightened.
Yes.
Towards the middle is comes in soft a little bit. What that suggests to us is as you're constructing your presentation, you don't want to put more of it in the center because more than likely your audience is at its worst.
Yes. Perfect, right on. So at the beginning, middle, and at the beginning, you have an attention opportunity. So you're going to start off with some confusing definition, some confusing graph, or are you going to say something that's clear, interesting, and effective? I'd say something that is clear, interesting, and effective right when your audience is focused on it. Now, when you've intrigued them with that clear, possible, brief description of the conclusion, you get into the middle of your presentation. You still have a decision, am I going to further explain the conclusion first, or am I going to start explaining the data that leads up to the conclusion and then give you the conclusion? Well, we have a little bit more of their attention at the beginning of our middle, so we might want to start with the conclusion first. So I've intrigued you in the beginning with something that's clear and understandable, and then I'm going to tell you the important conclusion and the takeaway, and work from there. At the end, as Vanessa said, the audience perks up a little bit. They realize your presentation's almost over. They think you're going to say something important. Give them what they want. Say, reinforce that content. Use that opportunity. Okay? Any questions about our conclusion and objective review? We're going to move on to PowerPoint design. And we could talk about PowerPoint for several sessions. These are just a few of the highlights, the greatest impact tools that I've noticed in my presentation consulting. So I'm going to go over some of these basics with you. First thing, I suggest you use an engaging and undistracting template. Make the template interesting, but all the way up until a point where it doesn't distract your audience. I like a simple white myself. You may notice that this has a slight cloud color to it, so it's not just a blank white, but something that looks a little more professional, but doesn't distract you. And you don't have to use white like this. You can use something interesting, something that engages your audience, but ask yourself, is this so interesting that it actually distracts the audience? If the answer to that is yes, make it a little more simple. I suggest using bullet points on your PowerPoint slide that are concise and incomplete. Why might I suggest that?
Well, then have to focus on the speaker to fully understand what it says in the slide.
Exactly. So you see this, and then your attention turns to me, because I need to fill in the rest for you. I'm not competing with the PowerPoint slide while you're reading some lengthy definition, and you're not confused by a lot of words. You're just guided by the PowerPoint. And then my job is to fill in the rest for you. I like a 5x3 rule for bullet points and text. I suggest a maximum of 5 bullet points, maximum of 3 words across. You don't always have to follow this rule, but I think it's a great rule of thumb. And if you find yourself using more than 5 bullet points, more than 3 words across, ask yourself, is this absolutely necessary? It may be. If it is, sometimes you have to do it. But I think that's the good rule of thumb to start with. parallel structure. I recommend parallel structure on bullet points such as these. You all are familiar with that. We talked about it with the written assignment, and I read a few of those last night when I couldn't sleep, and then they put me right to sleep. It's a joke. What do you think? Are you all fans of parallel structure at this point? All right, and how is it going to help your audience if you use parallel structure on bullet points in your PowerPoint slide? Jay?
Easier to read.
Easier to read, easier to understand.
Yeah.
You may be throwing so many different things at your audience, the last thing you want to do is confuse them with a curveball on the bullets themselves. Anything you can do, it's all going to add up. Customized slides. What I mean by customized slides, you may want to think of a footer such as Rutgers Business School, Business Communication, Spring 2016. Informs your audience where they are, what's going on in your presentation. Now this is a little different because we're in this whole class, but if you were just seeing me for a 20-minute or 30-minute presentation, and in the middle of my presentation you forget and you get confused, you always have some sort of little customized footer to ground you. Topic in top line. By top line, I mean this line, PowerPoint design. By now you've heard me stress the conclusion being the important thing so many times, you might be tempted to think that I want the conclusion in the top line, but I don't. I want the topic in the top line. It's the way we're used to understanding and processing this information. So I click to this slide. You see the nice customized header footer, or nice customized footer. You know how this slide relates to you. You see the topic in the top line. You know what's coming next. Important things that relate to that topic underneath. It's just what we've gotten used to, and it works effectively when we present. And like I mentioned, you've heard me say conclusion being important so many times that I have had people I've worked with, they'll put a conclusion right in the top line, and it gets a little jarring as an audience member. You're like all of a sudden, whoa, you must do this or that. I recommend you start with the topic to ground your audience. Yes?
In regards to that, I mean, I had people who had told me when I was working for a company, and they told me that they want to see, without having to read the whole slide, they want to actually see what's in the slide in just one sentence up at the top.
Okay.
Is that sort of the norm, or in let's say in the business world?
So they want to see what's in the slide. Do they want the conclusion in the slide?
Yeah. So they told me that without having to go through this entire content, you know, they want to, maybe they don't have a whole lot of time just by reading the headlines. They want to
Okay.
get a-
So absolutely, if those are your instructions, then you want to put the conclusion
Is that really
in the front line. I want to open up this discussion to you all, and we can discuss this when we see some examples of your presentations, but I think it works better this way. I think it gives your audience a minute to mentally categorize what's going on. So you're going to tell me some things about PowerPoint design. Maybe we're saying investment opportunities. Maybe you might have investment opportunities here, or investment decision here, and you know that what's going to be in the slide is a yes or no on the investment decision. Maybe that would guide your audience very quickly to the takeaway. Yes?
Yeah, I sort of, I'm trying to say the same thing, sort of like Priya, in the heading, many times I have heard, and from my previous mentors, make it a sellable, just don't write something like it should be like when you're in an international conference, the slide topic should attract people to come to you.
Okay. Yeah, I would not disagree with that.
And not have generic titles like PowerPoint design.
Okay, can you give me some examples? Maybe we'll discuss them.
Let's say if Yang is trying to invest, having an investment slide
Yes.
about one portfolio, she writes this portfolio is generating 20% return in 1 year. So 20% return on this portfolio in 1 year.
Okay. Okay.
rather than having the 20% down.
Okay, so instead of saying portfolio returns in the top line,
Yeah.
saying portfolio returns
So
20%. Okay, so that's something you need to weigh, and the factors you need to consider are, one, if your company tells you, we want the conclusion, or your manager tells you, we want the conclusion in your top line, obviously you want to do that.
Yeah.
If you're working with very well-informed investors who want it right up in front, that's another reason why you might want to put it in the beginning.
Yeah, I heard it from R&D people, like, going to technical conferences and new technology development.
Yeah, especially if you're going to a conference where you're going to be with like professionals who want that information fast, that is another thing you would want to consider. If this so-called conclusion is either going to surprise or scare your audience, then you might want to shy away from
Yeah.
that. And you might want to just present the topic. They're good points. These rules are not written in stone. These are my general recommendations. Okay, great. Let's look at a couple examples of PowerPoint slides and let's critique them based on these ideas and any other thoughts you have. So let's look at this first one. Take a look at that slide. Tell me how it could be more effective, or if it's already really effective, why? Second.
Yeah, I think that the background attracts me more than what the content is. I think you don't have 3 words, you have too many words, so I'm trying to figure out what actually you're trying to come up with, and I might lose attention to what the speaker is saying this way.
Okay, so background is good, right? You like the picture?
Yeah.
That can work. Too many words. It's hard to read all of this. And you might try to read it while the speaker is trying to tell you something important. And what was the other thing you said?
I thought that the background is not good.
Oh, not good.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
it's
So that's
distracting.
distracting. Okay. Okay, good. Other thoughts?
The color of the text is too light on the right side. It's okay on the left side, but
Yeah. So we're losing it here.
Exactly.
Now maybe if this person had shorter bullet points that didn't lead over to this side, we may say, oh, I like having this picture and I'm able to follow the shorter bullet points. That might be something. Anything else? Yeah.
I'm confused with the title. I don't know what's this title is really trying to tell.
Yes, okay. So it's a little out of context, so it's especially abrupt when you're seeing it. So this slide might benefit from a customized footer to tell us what's going on in this slide. I will tell you, this is a slide from a former student who was doing a resume PowerPoint presentation. He was presenting his resume as a PowerPoint. So if you knew that, you would have more information, but we can see it out of context and think it needs it even more. So this was a job. This person worked at the Department of Buildings Development Hub as the lead technical intern, and these are the duties that this person had. Josh, did you have something?
I was going to say that there was no parallel structure, which is jarring.
Yeah, jarring, okay. Josh uses the term jarring. Parallel structure is very jarring. Lack of parallel structure is jarring. So let's talk about the parallel structure here. What's going on with violations of parallel structure?
The third point is respond. It should be responded.
Yes, okay, so we've got perform, manage, assisted, and respond. So this is in present tense. This is the rest are in past tense. Anything else? Levy.
Oh, well, you have verbs and nouns.
Tell me.
Well, lead technical intern, and then other ones are like stuff that is done.
Okay, so this, yeah, exactly. So this is a noun, and the rest are verbs. So lead technical intern is a noun. It's a thing. And the rest of these are verbs, doing things.
Is that an issue with that?
That is an issue, and that's interesting.
And how would you fix it? Let's say you want to say you were the lead technical intern. How would you
Yeah.
fit that in there?
And what I say about this slide is there's another violation of parallel structure, that this is the title and these are the duties. So it's doubly confusing that way. Not only is there's one series of verbs and the other is a noun, but this is the title and these are the duties. So you would want to structure it differently so it's visually obvious to your audience. Just like you do on a resume. You don't put the title, the job title, in the same visual format as you put the duties, right? So you would structure that differently and you would change this respond to responded, and of course you would cut it down to like 3 words. Other comments on that? Priya?
Actually, I mean, sometimes it's unavoidable that you can't really have it like 3 words or 5 words. And I have done that in my presentation sometimes, that I would actually color, code the words that I want my audience to focus on. Either make it bold or get the color, and sort of audience knows that I want them to focus on those. Would that be an okay technique, or
Yeah.
what would you?
I think that's a good technique. Another technique that I'll recommend is use this entrance effect. So you might have parallel structure here, and then your next click will be a longer paragraph explaining parallel structure because you feel for some reason you need to include that. So while you're talking, you just have this, and then when you're ready for the longer definition or ready to move on to the slide,
You animate it in a way. that
You animate it in? Yeah. Any other comments? Then?
Hasn't been brought up, but I just want to talk about animation. You know, they have all these fancy ways to bring in the next slide. I personally think that's very unprofessional.
Like a bouncy
Yeah.
slide or
Yeah, I've
something
seen
like that.
those.
Or a sound effect. Zoom. Yeah.
Seen anybody having a sound?
I've seen that.
Yeah.
And depending on the context of the presentation, sometimes it can work. Most of the time, I would recommend a more conservative entrance effect. Levy, how do you like what I've done here? Just I think this is a white, and it's just. Do you like what I've done, or do you think this is too unprofessional?
Well, you talk,
It's okay, you
go,
can tell
go,
me.
no, go to the next one. It is conservative.
Oh,
It's
the sideways
Is
white.
that what you're talking about? That's what you were just talking about.
Well, I was asking, do you think these right here?
No, those are good.
These are fine.
Yeah, those are fine.
These are fine, but too much, even the white from the side.
Well, I think, like if I'm listening to a presentation, this is me. It's because I don't know, I've got ADD or something. But I'll read it. I'll read the stuff, and then I just won't listen anymore.
Yeah.
So that's kind of when
Okay,
you.
so wait, let me stop you there. So he's reading the stuff and he's not listening to you. That is not what we want as a presenter.
Yeah, correct.
Tell us how
So-
to fix that.
Well, if you do it the way you do it, where you say, like, you're not putting up a whole slide, so you're only putting up the point as you're saying it, or after you said it, then I'm listening to you, and then I could always kind of just go back and look just to kind of recall the points that you've mentioned.
Yeah. So short, concise bullet points that guide the audience when they need to check in and see where you are. But most of the time, Levy's going to be looking at you. All right, great. Let's look at another example, see if we like this PowerPoint slide, see if we don't like it. Boom. Take a look. Tell me if you like the way that's laid out and the way that it is brought in. Nelly.
It might actually need more wording.
Okay.
More wording to each bullet point, maybe?
All right. Possibly more wording. Any other comments? Okay. You want to see the experience, credit, collateral, revenue coming one at a time?
Right, because otherwise, as the audience, you're just gonna be looking through the whole thing while your presenter is talking about each bullet point.
I would agree with that. That's a concern. But I would also, and I'm not saying that's not a good point, but I would also say that it could be much worse. If under each of these I had several bullet points and a lengthy definition, then your audience would definitely be distracted by this. Here, I have one word for 4 different subjects under credit writing considerations. So we're talking about credit writing considerations. We've got a nice footer, small business administration. We've got a source. I could inform you at the beginning that we're going to talk about 4 things under credit writing considerations: experience, credit, collateral, revenue. So now let me talk about experience. Now let me talk about credit. Now let me talk about revenue. So this might work to guide you through my whole presentation, and the rest is up to me to explain. The rest of the time the focus is on me. So perhaps you can bring them in one at a time. This might be okay, bringing all 4 of them in at the time, at the same time. Comments?
I feel the layout is kind of like heavy up on the top of the sign, and then it's just all blank on the right side. I don't know if there's a way you can.
What, you don't like this white space?
Yes, too much white.
Oh, what do you want, maybe a little centered?
I just feel the layout of the paper looks so unbalanced.
Oh, that's a good point. Anyone else feel that way?
I don't feel like it's plain.
Stand back here.
Yeah, I feel the same too. It's as if I'm expecting something else to show up.
Ah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a perfectly valid point. Maybe you would want to move these a little bit to the center. Maybe it's just a context thing as well. If you do all your slides like this, and as you get to this point in your presentation, your audience knows that, oh, you're just going to have these 4 things. But, you know, definitely consider that. Natalie?
Where do you stand on pictures?
I like pictures. Yeah. Pictures are good to entertain and inform your audience, just as long as they're not too busy and not too distracting.
I don't like the font.
Okay, the font. What do you tell me about? What do you want?
I don't know, it doesn't seem like the font is a good fit for the topic of discussion.
Maybe something a little more professional, given we're talking about credit and
Yeah.
whatnot.
Yeah.
It looks sort of cartoonish.
Yeah.
All right, that's fair. Frank?
Do you think it is better to add some motions? For example, the last 3 parts come out after you finish the first part experience.
You want these in one at a time?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. And then Zhening and I were talking about that being a possible option. That it could work this way. It could also be better one at a time, Josh.
I guess the whole thing is just a little too minimalist for me. You know, the all white background with just such sparse text. I think that's what they were, you know, alluded to before. Is that I mean, it's a little unbalanced visually, but the whole thing might be better even if it was the slight clouding background that you have.
Okay.
On the slides.
Yeah, you're right. And in fairness, I get this comment a lot. And honestly, the reason I put this slide up is an example of a good, clear presentation. I'm going to have to rethink this because I do get this being, well, it's just, I need more. It's too minimalist. So thanks for the feedback there. And these are all great points. But I would like to point out that there are definitely redeeming qualities in this slide in that it doesn't confuse your audience, gives your audience a guidepost, if you will, and allows them to focus on you. Even though, to your points, it could be improved. Okay, avoid PowerPoint competition. So, we've talked about this idea of your audience reading the PowerPoint when you want them to be listening to you. How are we going to avoid that competition? We're going to talk to the audience. We are not going to turn and look at the slides and spend our whole time facing the slides, looking at the slides. It just looks weird when someone's back is to you. It also looks like they're giving their power to the slide. I've heard the analogy, it looks like you're bowing down to the slide. By staring at it the whole time, you're telling the audience, this is what you need to look at. This is the important thing. Not me, the person who's worked in this industry for 20 years and spent the last 2 months on this project. Don't listen to me, just read the slide. So talk to the audience, face the audience. They want to hear from you as the expert.
Also, I find people who look at slides give off the impression that they actually don't know, like they don't know the stuff, actually just reading off the slides, they're not familiar with the topic enough to just say offhand.
Yeah, exactly.
And I see this with a lot of professors in some classes.
Okay, fair enough. So, you want to listen to someone who's an expert in their field, and they should be able to talk to you from memory for a good portion of this presentation. They may refer back to the slide just to see where they are and be reminded, but if they do something like, okay, let's see, how can we avoid PowerPoint competition? Well, let's get some ideas. Oh, turn, touch, talk. That's something we can use. Let me see what that is. Read the definition. That's going to hurt your credibility, as Levy pointed out. So talk to the audience. A technique you can use to talk to the audience is a technique called touch, turn, talk. It was developed by 3M. Let me explain how this concept works. This concept involves doing these three things, and by touch means click the pointer, or click the slide thing for the next bullet or the next slide. So that's the touch. Turn means turn and look at the slide, and turn back. And talk means talk to your audience. So three things. Touch to the next slide, turn, look at the slide, look back to your audience, and talk. The key for this concept is you do all those three things one at a time. You do not do any two of them together. You do not touch, turn, and talk as you are, you don't touch, turn, and talk at the same time. Sometimes I'll point out this method when I notice a presenter, their head going back and forth like 20 times during the presentation. Or if you have a tendency to talk as you're looking at your slide and talk as you're turning back, and if that gets confusing, I'll say, let's use the touch, turn, talk method developed by 3M to make sure that you're only doing one thing at a time.
Why is the heading of the title avoid PowerPoint competition?
Okay, so the idea is we don't want to compete with PowerPoint. We don't want PowerPoint competing for the audience's attention with us.
All right.
I want PowerPoint to be helping me, not competing with me. I don't want you distracted and trying to read the PowerPoint when you should be listening to me. Another technique we can use, blank screen. So what are you going to do now? Do I have any competition from PowerPoint right now? No, because there's a blank screen. Maybe I have an important conclusion I want to emphasize at this point. Maybe I want to explain my expertise in a certain area. For whatever reason, I want you to focus on me. It's a very powerful technique. Most clickers will have a blank screen option. Stand to the left. So this is a little hard because we've got this lectern here. The idea is that I suggest you stand to the left of the PowerPoint. Why would I suggest you stand to the left? To make it easier on your audience and to avoid this PowerPoint competition.
Probably because of the way that you read from left to right, so it forces us to start with you and then to follow the screen.
Yeah, so you start with me because we read left to right, and then as your eye gets to the end of the sentence, you'll automatically come back to me because that's the way you read. You just read left to right, left to right, left to right. Just one of those little things that makes it a little bit easier on your audience and puts you in more of a powerful position to translate what's on the slide. I like to recommend often that folks use that zip zap zoom technique we did last time. So it's almost like I have some sort of ball of energy and I'm going to zip zap it to the audience. And I'm in this power position to the left of the screen, physically engaged. My audience can read what's on the slide, but their focus will naturally be drawn back to me. Josh?
I guess I have a question about if you're presenting with multiple people or two or more people, do you recommend that everyone's to the left and or alternating sides, or should you just like swap positions as you go through?
All right, good point. It depends. First thing I'll say is this is not a hard and fast rule. For one thing, I mentioned we have this desk, so I don't stand to the left of this lectern. So I often stand here. We do the best we can. Maybe if you're having two people present and they're interchanging their speech, I'd probably recommend one on either side. That tends to be the most comfortable for the audience. If for some reason you have some materials over here, you might have two on one side. That could look a little awkward, but if there's a reason why they need to work with the audio visuals or show samples or something. Yeah. What else we got? If you have several people just waiting to talk, you might have 3 people in a line and do your best not to make that look awkward.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure other people so, you know, it's like there'll be 2 people on that side, there'll be 4 of us on that side, and everyone's just kind of like waiting their turn, and then it's like, oh, it's my side, let me just kind of slide by everyone to get towards the screen.
Okay.
So I don't know.
Yeah, well, what's your thought on this? Does that get confusing? What's the best way to handle that?
I mean, I think the best, or what's worked out the best is when everyone knows very clearly what the order is, and, you know, to the best of our ability, everyone's standing in that order already, so that even if you do have to switch, it's kind of just one person moves to the end, and then it's set up.
Yes, and it makes it easier on the audience too. They just say, all right, this person, this person, this person, rather than this person talks, this person, oh, this person, and then this person who's saying, I didn't see you, you're standing behind the other guy. That might be confusing. Another thing to keep in mind, or technique that works, is have everyone who is not presenting staring at the person who is presenting. So it's not like you have these 7 people facing the audience who's going to speak next. It's, if you're not speaking, you're intently looking at the person waiting for your turn to contribute. Okay, stand to the left and some other stuff. Entrance effects. This is what we talked about with the animation effects. Click in one at a time. So if I have everything on the slide, and I'm trying to talk to you about entrance effects, what are you looking at right now that might be competing with my desire to tell you about entrance effects? The PowerPoint, but is there something specifically you're looking at that you're wondering, oh, I wonder what that is? Maybe not. Well, how about this last one, overture the slide. So I have to put all of the bullet points there, but I'm trying to get you to concentrate on entrance effects. Maybe you're looking at this last one saying, I wonder what that is. Oh, when's he going to start talking about that overture? Is this a musical thing? What's going on here? So, I recommend bringing things in one at a time. Very powerful way to keep your audience with you. Now, if you cannot do entrance effects, if you have to bring in everything at once, maybe you're bringing in a graph, maybe for whatever reason, entrance effects aren't practical, I like a technique I call overture the slide. Now, if you are a musician, you know overture means at the beginning of a musical, it's just a short little blurb of all the musical numbers, all the things in this play, opera, whatever. So it's just a short little introduction of everything that you're going to do, and then you get into the meat of it and you do all of those things. So I recommend using this technique by explaining everything that's on the slide and then zeroing in on where you want your audience to focus. So if I'm using the overture the slide technique on this slide, I might say, let's talk about how you can avoid PowerPoint competition. We're going to first talk about the idea of talking to the audience. I'm going to go over a 3M technique. I'm going to tell you about a blank screen, a concept about standing to the left. Then we'll talk about entrance effects. And finally, I'm going to talk about this technique of overturing the slide. Now, let's go back to the first one. Talk to the audience. Let me explain that. Now let's move on to the second one. Touch, turn, talk. So I have satisfied your curiosity of what is on the entirety of this slide. Therefore, you are less likely to try to read it while I'm trying to get you to focus here. Any questions? Make sense? Okay, let's look at a couple PowerPoint examples. Same thing, try to think about what we like, what we don't like. So this is another example from the Small Business Administration. I'm going to talk to you about eligible project costs for this project. I've got a bunch of things. I got real estate, machinery and equipment, soft costs, refinancing. I've got all this information up, and I just throw it at you all at once. Let me suggest instead, I might use an entrance effect. I might say, boom, here are the project eligible costs. First, I'm going to talk about real estate. And we're going to talk about how existing buildings and renovation factors into that. Now let's talk about machinery and equipment. Yada, yada, yada. Now let's talk about soft costs. Now let's talk about a refinance. So do we like that better than throwing it at you all at once? Definitely. I think it's an improvement. But still, I'm bringing in these blocks all together? What if I were to break it down and bring it in one line at a time? What if I were to say real estate? Okay, now under real estate we have existing buildings, blah, 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 blah. And we also have renovation stuff, blah, 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 blah. Now let's talk about machinery and equipment. Minimum 10-year life, there's some details you need to know with that. And you also need to know about the manufacturing equipment. How do you like that? What if I were to bring them in one at a time? Would you like that more than bringing them in as chunks?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, so I think it's a little improvement. Let me take it one step further. Suppose I were to do it like this. Let's talk about the project eligible costs. The different cost categories are as follows. We've got real estate, machinery and equipment, soft costs, and we've got refinancing. Those are the 4 broad categories. Now let's focus in on real estate for right now. Let me tell you about existing buildings, let me tell you about motivation, or renovations. Okay, we've talked about that. Now let's talk about machinery and equipment. 10-year life, manufacturing equipment. Same thing with soft costs, same things with refinancing. How do you like that?
Much better. Much structured.
Yeah, I like that. So it gives us the overview of the 4 things, guides our audience, doesn't give them a bunch of confusing text until you've had a chance to explain it and address it. Okay, let's move on to transitions. Now this is nothing complicated, this is transitioning from point A to point B. First I was talking about marketing, now I'm going to talk about the financing aspect. Now I'm talking about the financing aspect, now I'm going to talk about the operations. Just going from point 1 to point 2 can be confusing if you don't guide your audience the right way. Especially if you're up here, if you're nervous, you're just firing through data, and your audience doesn't realize where you are. So some very simple techniques to say, let's move on to the next point. Let's think about how point A is related to point B. Let me hint at point B before I even get to point A. I've got a technique for transitions I recommend called the triple L strategy. In order of effectiveness, I recommend you lead into transitions, link items as you transition, and label transitions. Let me explain this in more detail. So this strategy, in order of effectiveness or preference, leading is the best thing to do, linking is the second best thing to do, labeling is the minimal thing you must do. Let me give you some examples. So, labeling is just saying you're making a transition. So that was our little blurb on finance. Now let's talk about the marketing aspect. I just labeled that I'm moving on to something else. Simple, but very important. Have any of you ever heard a presentation where the speaker doesn't label a transition? And all of a sudden you're like, whoa, marketing, finance, I'm lost. I was lost already, now I'm even more lost. You must label your transitions. What's even better is if you can link point A to point B. So, that was the finance aspect. And we're going to make a lot of money in this investment opportunity, but the question is, how are we going to advertise this? How are we going to tell everyone that the finance aspect is so strong? All right, well, that's where marketing comes in. So let's talk about marketing. So we've linked point A, point B. And what's even better, I think, is if you can lead into the next subject by hinting at it, without even saying it. Get your audience interested in what's coming next before you tell them what's next. So here we're talking about finance. This is a great investment opportunity, right? You all like the finance aspect. So what do we need to do next? Do we just sit on this finance opportunity? No, we've got to tell people about it. We've got to market it. Good point, Ness. I'm glad you brought up that marketing aspect. So let's move on to the marketing aspect. Let me lead into it by hinting at it as I finish up the first time. Any questions on that? Do you like the triple L strategy? Very least, label transition, link the topic A to topic B, lead into it if you can. Now, if you are using multiple speakers, I also recommend you use this transition. So if you have one person, say you have a So you have 7 people doing this presentation for your business school class. You want to explain why you're transitioning from one person to the next. So I talked to you about finance. I'm going to pass it on to Josh, who's going to talk about marketing. At the very least, just label that you're transitioning. Don't just give them the clicker and say, or not even say anything. You may have seen presentations like that. You just stop talking and pass the clicker. And everybody's like, that looks weird. Even better if you can link what you're talking about to what Josh is going to talk about. Even better if you can spur some excitement about what you've done and how the next step is going to be related to that. So, multiple speakers, I recommend using this strategy as well. All right, this is the next topic is related to transitions, but it's a little bit of PowerPoint design as well. It involves the concept of using trackers to help your audience understand as you transition through different material. A tracker is a visual cue of where you are in your presentation, such as something like this. You might have at the top of your PowerPoint slide a visual cue such as this that has potential profit, cost, and compliance. And the middle one, cost, is highlighted. So your audience knows that this slide is about cost, and you've just finished talking about potential profit, and you're going to be talking about compliance. Really effective way to keep your audience with you. Let me show you a few slides examples here. So we're back to our Small Business Administration, some 504 loan program. Here, you can look up at the tracker and you can see we're talking about the potential profit for this opportunity. So anything I talk about, you know is related to potential profit. I move on. Now I'm talking about cost. Now this might get confusing. There might be a bunch of complex data I'm going to throw at you, but you have this cue that it's all related to cost. It's not related to profit. It's related to the cost. This is similar to a number of the techniques I suggested with your written essay. I suggested you use all sorts of things: thesis, subheading, topic sentences, all things to guide your audience so that you can get complex with your presentation without confusing. This tracker is another tool just like that. It allows you to get complex and not lose your audience. Now let's talk about compliance. All right, compliance is a big issue. It's confusing. But you know everything under here relates to compliance, and you've got a nice little checklist. Think about how it fits in. Trackers are great. They take some effort to make on the PowerPoint, but it can really distinguish you. Okay, any questions about trackers? Any questions about transitions? Let's move on to visual aids. So as you're transitioning through, you might talk about or use various visual aids to make your point, make your conclusion. We're going to talk about the 4 main types of visual aids you will use: tables, pie charts, bar charts, and line graphs. Let's first talk about when you might use each of them, and then we'll talk about some ways to present them. I'll tell you what I'm going for here, this first one, or I'll take the first one. If you're using a table, if you use a table in a technical presentation, you will probably use it just to present numbers. A table doesn't show trends, it doesn't show relative size, it just shows numbers. So if for whatever reason you just need to get the numbers out there, you would probably use a table. Now, if you were to use a pie chart, it would show something different. It might show a trend, it might show relative size. Let me ask you, what is the advantage of using a pie chart? What point might you be trying to make if you're using a pie chart? Now,
Proportion?
yeah, proportion to a whole. That's the main reason to use a pie chart. How about a bar chart? Why might you use a bar chart? Sure.
Comparison, compare like 2 years.
Yeah, visually, bar charts help us with comparisons. And line graphs, when might we use a line graph? Right.
To show the trend.
Trends over time. Yeah, these are the main things you will do as a business presenter. Use these 4 types to serve these purposes. Look at a couple examples. This is a table. Like I said, a table doesn't show trends, doesn't show comparisons, it just shows numbers. So for whatever reason you need to show numbers, you might use a table like this. There are a couple things that this table does to make it a little bit easier on the audience. You can see the headings at the top and the years along the side are in a slightly different color. Visually makes it easier for your audience. And you can also see that every other line has a slightly different shade. Is another thing that just makes it easier on your audience. Still doesn't show trends, but it makes it a little bit easier for your audience to read. Look at another example of a visual aid. Take a look at this visual aid. Tell me what I'm trying to communicate with this. What is the story of this graph? Okay?
The first quarter is the biggest sales quarter.
Yeah? This is what I'm trying to tell you by choosing this graph. The biggest quarter is the biggest part of our sales, and in fact, it's more than half of our sales. Now, if you look closely at this graph, there are a couple other stories going on with this data. A couple other things that I could have accented if I had chosen to do so. What else is going on with this data?
The sales are declining gradually.
Yeah, sales are declining gradually. It's not completely apparent with this graph. What type of graph would I have used, visual aid would I have used if I wanted to show declining sales?
Line graph.
Line graph. Yes, absolutely. What else? Any other story going on here?
Wow.
Is there?
The
Second.
first quarter has more than 50% of the sales.
Okay. I think this is the way, if that's what I want you to focus on, this is the graph that I want to choose.
Yeah.
And I think that shows that very well.
One question when I'm having a graph of this sort, like I'm trying to understand the pattern or format, should I have analysis also beneath that, or should I talk about the analysis?
I would recommend you talk about the analysis.
Okay, no line, nothing to write.
Well, let's talk about that in a minute. I'm going to go over a technique I like to use for presenting a graph, and we'll see where that might fit in. It is possible you could have some analysis.
Yeah.
Generally, I would say no.
Okay.
Or if you do, there's some ways we can make it clear. Yeah,
What kind of, do you put the percentage on the side to show?
you could. You could. In this graph, I chose not to, but I still think I think it even more effectively shows this particular point without the percentages. Just by looking at the pie, you see, wow, more than half of the pie in the first quarter. That's all I'm saying with this graph. If I was giving you numbers, I would be trying to say something slightly different. Okay, so back to other stories that this data might be telling. Jingnao said that there is a declining amount of sales. There's declining sales over time. Is there anything else? How about the size of quarter 2? You notice that's pretty big. It's bigger than 3 and 4, and if you look closely, you can see that it is bigger than 3 and 4 combined. But it doesn't really jump out at you. Suppose I wanted to focus on quarter 2. I wanted to say, everyone knows that quarter 1 is our primary sales season, but what we often forget is how important quarter 2 is. It's twice as big as quarter 3 or quarter 4. So let's concentrate on ramping up our capabilities for that time of year. If I wanted to tell you that story, what type of graph might I use?
Bar.
I think a bar graph. Yeah, Priya, comment?
But actually, if you put the percentages in there, you can still make the case.
Okay.
But you know, as you can see from the numbers here, putting these two together, it's still, you know, the second quarter is much higher than that.
Okay, so to Priya's point, you could put the numbers in.
Yeah, like she said.
Let's take a look at this. So if I wanted to focus on the second quarter, I feel like this would be a fast, effective way to do it. You could just look at the bar graph and you could see, wow, this is actually 3 times as big as the third quarter, more than 3 times as big as the fourth quarter. Of course, we all know that the first quarter is a big deal, but bam, let's look at that comparison. Do you think that speaks to you faster with a bar graph, or would it speak to you faster, Priya, if I had the percentages here?
I think if I had this as well as the percentage, and I want to convey both at the same time, you know,
So,
to my,
like, what do you
like I want to show them that, you know, the relative proportion as well as tell them that the second quarter is equally important.
Okay, fair enough.
That's just me.
And I would say if we're looking at one thing at a time, if I want the fact that the second quarter sales are very important to just jump out at you, I would show you a bar graph without numbers.
Also on the chart, pie chart, if you wanted to emphasize the second quarter, can you just move it out like they have a special effect? So
Yeah.
people can-
Yeah, absolutely. Good point. Advanced technique, definitely. And if we wanted to show declining over time, we could use a line graph. Now, obviously, your audience can look at it and see it just based on the bar graph, but we make it that much more obvious to our audience. Our conclusion is declining sales over the course of the year. That's what we need to address today. I'm going to use a line graph. In terms of how we would present these graphs, I have a method I call the take method to presenting a graph. Often, when you're presenting a technical presentation and you get to the graph, it's so tempting to get into the technical details of that graph very, very quickly. It's so tempting to tell people about all the interesting work that you did and to get into the nuances of it. But I recommend you slow down and overview the graph in a slightly different way, because this is the first time your audience is hearing the graph, and I like this method I call the take method. First, I recommend you go over the title, then I recommend you explain the axes, then I recommend you say the key takeaway, and then I recommend you elaborate on the nuances. Now, I think your audience is going to do all of these things, whether you take them through it or not. Because as you present a graph, your audience needs to read the title. They need to understand where on the axes. Is it years? Is it profit levels? And then they're going to be looking for the key takeaways. But if you try to explain, get straight into the elaboration, this last point, while your audience is still trying to process these three, then we're going to create some sort of competition between you and your graph, which we do not want to create. We want you to be guiding your audience to the important points in your graph. And I recommend you take a breath, go slowly, start with the title, explain the axes, say the key takeaway, and once you've done all that, then get into some of the nuances. For example, if I were to present this graph, I would say, here's a graph on our sales. Around the axes, you can see we have the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, and fourth quarter. The key takeaway on this data is that our first quarter sales are the overwhelming amount of our sales, and they are more than half for the year. Now there's some further points I want to elaborate on. We've got some declining sales things that we need to talk about, and we also have a key opportunity in the second quarter where we have a big chunk of sales. That's how I recommend you go through a graph. Gives your audience a chance to absorb it before you jump into the finer points. Take method. Very, very powerful. I developed this technique while I was working with energy analysts to present all this complicated statistical data to determine how someone, an investor in the energy market, might be manipulating the energy market. These were smart folks. They threw so much technical stuff at me. And I developed this technique. Said, let's just slow down. Tell me the title before you tell me about all these chi statistic something that's going to confuse me. The let's move on. Oh, question?
I just, yeah, would you ever have or want to use a slightly more specific title than just sales? You know, could you lead in, you know, first quarter dominance and then, you know, look at the pie chart and say, wow, look at it, it is the most, you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm just trying to keep it simple. And to the discussion we had earlier, you could have the conclusion be the title of the graph. You could have the topic being the title of the graph. And you want to weigh some of those factors that we talked about earlier in the class. So let's move on to jargon. I've added to jargon. Not only is a technical expert tempted to use jargon, you also might be tempted to use what I call an expert understanding, which means it's not technically jargon, it's not a term that people won't understand, but it's something you understand because of your familiarity with the industry. So it's not a word that's confusing, it's just something or a way you're using it. So jargon is, what are jargon? Give me some examples of jargon. Jargon you've heard, presentations you've heard, jargon you used unknowingly. What sort of things have you heard in a presentation where you're like, whoa, what's going on here? What is that?
Let's give an example. A lot of times with like the second years, when we're talking to the first years, especially during orientation, we start picking up a lot of language like, what's your elevator pitch? You know, blah, blah, B school, and they haven't oriented it yet to sort of the business and business school. So a lot of times those sort of stereotypes like elevator pitch, that's an example of jargon.
Yes, fantastic. So your audience doesn't understand the term. You're not talking about complicated stuff, but yet you are obscuring the meaning and confusing your audience because you're using terms that they don't understand. Obscure meaning, distract your audience, lacks strength, unknown equals unimportant. If your audience doesn't understand what you're talking about, they're not going to say, wow, I have no idea what you're talking about. It must be really important. I'm going to go home and think about it. They're probably going to forget about it. So we don't want to use jargon. We want to eliminate it. Not only terms like elevator pitch or flex program or chi-squared. We also want to avoid using things that are simple words, but we understand them in a certain context that our audience does not. Have a strategy experience.
So doesn't it depend again who you are actually speaking to? I mean, if you're speaking to an audience that is very familiar with the subject, I mean, you might as well want it. Otherwise, it might portray that you are actually not an expert or you don't have a good handle on the topic.
Yes.
So it really depends. I feel personally who your audience is.
Yes, absolutely. Remember we talked about in the first class, the only standard for whether or not you give a good presentation is how well it is received by your audience. So it doesn't matter that you are or are not using the right terms, it matters how your audience understands those terms. So sometimes you can use jargon, sometimes you don't want to use jargon. We talked about an IT person who might have the ability to translate things to a lay audience, and I said that person is golden, that person is extremely valuable. But if that same IT person is talking to other IT people, then she or he can talk in a slightly different language. So my strategy for this is my EEE jargon elimination strategy. Step 1, you expose the jargon. Step 2, you eliminate or you explain the jargon. Now expose just means think about what in your presentation is jargon. And to Priya's point, that is going to vary. Maybe it's going to be a bunch of people who understand that term, and if they do, then fine, use it. But if it's going to be people who don't understand that term, then think about eliminating it or explaining it. This could be as simple as you just going through your presentation, thinking to yourself, did I know this term before I got into this industry? Maybe you can talk to your roommate, your colleague, person in the next cubicle. Hey, do you know what flex program means? Hey, do you know what chi-squared means? And if they say no, you may have exposed that as jargon. Eliminate it if you can, or if you need to, think about explaining it. Maybe there's a key term that your audience must understand. Like you must understand elevator pitch before we go forward in this conversation. So let me spend 30 seconds explaining elevator pitch to you. All right, now let's move forward in this conversation. So I've got an example that I want to go through. This is a sports example, and it contains some jargon. The thing I like about sports examples is ultimately it's fairly simple stuff. But to people who know the sport, love the sport, they will often talk in a very complex way that contains lots of jargon. So I'm going to take you through this sports example. It's a basketball game that happened a couple years ago. I'm going to throw some jargon at you, and then I'm going to ask you to break it down. Tell me where the jargon is, expose it, think about how we can eliminate it, or think about what we might need to explain. So do we have any basketball fans in the room? All right, a couple of basketball fans who can guide us through this exercise. So let me start by just reading you these points, and then we're going to come back, and we're going to take them one at a time and say, where's the jargon, what can we do with it? So this is an example of a game that happened, Miami Heat versus the Brooklyn Nets in 2014. So let me just read these to you one at a time, and then we'll come back. So on April 8th, 2014, Miami hosted Brooklyn in one of the last games of the regular season. April 8th, 2014, Miami hosted Brooklyn. Brooklyn had won all 3 previous regular season games. Miami initially used size advantage to attack the paint. Miami's LeBron James and Chris Bosh both got into foul trouble early in the third quarter and relied more on perimeter shooting. Miami's James and Bosh combined were 0 of 7 in three-point attempts. With the inside threat removed, Brooklyn's Mason Plumlee guarded Miami's LeBron James aggressively and blocked LeBron's would have been game-winning shot with 2.1 seconds remaining in the game. Brooklyn won 88-87. So that's the information. Let's back up. Let's think about where the jargon is. How can we explain it? How can we eliminate it or explain it if we need to? Now keep in mind, not only jargon, but what I'm calling expert understanding. Things that you know because you're a basketball fan and someone else wouldn't know. Let's take a look at the first one. On April 8th, 2014, Miami hosted Brooklyn, one of the last games of the regular season. Is there jargon or expert understanding there? And if so, how do we need to address it, Jerry?
Regular season
Yeah, regular season. What's the regular season?
for 82 games,
Yeah, first part of the game. What happens after the regular season?
the playoffs.
The playoffs. So if we're at the end of the regular season, we're getting to a very important part of the actual season, which is the playoffs. So what happens? There's some anticipation for the playoffs. People are all excited. Are we going to get into the playoffs? Are we going to win? Brooklyn had won all 3 previous regular season games. Anything going on there? Yeah.
I think you need a little background knowledge about how many seven games you don't know if you won 4 out of 7, so you'll move forward. So they already won 3. This game will be important.
Okay, good. All right, good. So Yang is interesting. She's demonstrating just enough knowledge to be dangerous, but she's actually missing something. Jerry?
That she's referring to the playoffs. This is the playoffs.
Yeah, she's talking about the playoffs, what happens in the playoffs. This is actually the regular season. So what might be going on with the regular season? If you've won all 3 regular season games and you're getting ready for the playoffs, what might the fact that Brooklyn won the 3 previous games have to do with this? What's that?
Is there something with the location in the playoffs?
It might be. It could be. So the team that wins more might have an advantage of the location. I'm not sure about that. What else might be going on? Momentum? No? You're going to go into the playoffs against a team that beat you 3 times in the regular season, and if they're going to beat you a 4th time in the regular season, how well do you think you're going to fare against them in the playoffs? Probably not so well. And this is Miami hosting Brooklyn. So Miami's home court. Is that an important factor we need to bring to our audience's attention? So this is in Miami's home court. They got beat 3 times by Brooklyn, and they're about to get beat a 4th time And we're getting ready for the playoffs and trying to build up some momentum. And we're the Miami Heat. Anyone want to explain how that factors into this?
So the previous champion?
What's that?
Were they the previous year champions?
Were they, I forget. Were they? Does anyone know? Was this is this before they actually won? They'd never won?
I think they won.
They won the previous year. And then the question is, are they going to be, is LeBron going to be able to lead his team to another one? All right, so this Miami Heat, I think the jargon or expert understanding is this is a group of stars that came together for which there are very high expectations. And they're getting their butts kicked 3 times in the previous games from Brooklyn. And can they even perform on their own floor as they get ready for the playoffs? All right, so let's get into what actually happened during the game. Miami initially used size advantage to attack the paint. What's going on there? Any jargon there that we need to explain or eliminate?
Size advantage.
Okay, somebody raise it. Eric.
Depends.
Yeah, what do you know what that means?
I know.
You do? Okay, can you explain it?
It's you are able to attack from the under the basket.
Okay, it's the area under the basket. So what does it mean? The paint is the area under the basket. But what do I mean when someone says I'm attacking the paint?
You're playing really aggressively, so you have certain big guys in the line that are
Okay, and dunking and layups, and those would be close range shots, and it tends to be more aggressive play in that close range.
Although the dunking and layups is also jogging.
Oh, very good. So instead of dunking and layups, let's say close range shots. All right, so they're using close range shots, and if you're using close range shots, this size advantage is helpful to you. Then what happened? Miami's LeBron James and Chris Bosh both got into foul trouble early in the third quarter and relied more on perimeter shooting. What's happening there? Yeah, foul trouble. What is foul trouble? Anyone know what foul trouble is? Yeah.
If I remember correctly, it's everybody got 5 or 6 fouls. If you are already on 5th one, you'll be very careful because you want to be able to still play for the whole game, so you'll be more conservative.
Yes. So if you get 6 fouls, you're out of the game. So that's just the definition of foul trouble or how fouls work. But you brought up a second important point, because if you get 5 fouls, then you have to play in a different style. You have to be careful because you're that much closer to getting thrown out of the game. So what if you get into foul trouble early in the third quarter? How does that change the game? You as the expert in basketball, how are you going to explain that to a lay audience?
So you will try to avoid the person having touch or contact.
Yes, you try to avoid that personal contact. You might have to play less aggressively. Vanessa just told us that they relied on this aggressive, close, short-range baskets. So they had to change their whole strategy because they got in foul trouble. Now, early in the third quarter, is that a big deal, little deal? It's a huge deal. So early in the third quarter means you have almost half the game left, and your 2 stars are already in trouble. So it drastically affects the game. So they changed their strategy. Miami and Bosh combined were 0 of 7 in 3-point attempts. What's the jargon there? And how it might be important to the point we're trying to make or the conclusion we're trying to draw, Jared?
3-point attempts.
Okay. Yeah, so what are 3-point attempts?
Just you're shooting at the 2-point line.
Yes.
And if it's 0 to 7, that means that they don't have the ability to shoot from far away.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So 3-point attempts are long-range shots, and in the paint is close-range shots. So they had to switch to long-range shots, and how'd they do once they switched to long-range shots? Not so good. The 2 stars missed the 2.
Yeah, I still don't get what 0 of 7 means. It means they missed all 7 shots.
Good. Another point of jargon or expert understanding we overlooked that Levy is pointing out. 0-7 means they missed all 7 shots. The 2 of them combined took 7 attempts from 3-point range, and they missed them all. With the inside threat removed, Brooklyn's Mason Plumlee guarded LeBron's James aggressively and blocked LeBron's would-have-been game-winning shot with 2.1 seconds remaining in the game. Any jargon or expert understanding we need to explain there? That's pretty straightforward. You see what happened. But there, I think, are some nuances in expert understanding that we could point out. Anyone want to take a crack at it? And I'll give you a hint of where I'm going with this. Who is LeBron James and who is Mason Plumlee?
Well, I was going to say, I guess, I don't know exactly your point, but why the removal of the inside threat allows Mason Plumlee to guard him aggressively.
Okay. Do you want to explain that, or is there a question?
No, I mean, I can try to explain, but I guess because he doesn't have to worry about LeBron James going to the paint, he can worry only exclusively about those outside shots and be very close on him.
Yes, so it changes the way that Brooklyn could guard. Right? You don't have to worry about them trying to be aggressive and go for the short range shots, so you can get closer, you can get right up in their face. Let me take that a step further. Again, who is Mason Plumlee and who is LeBron James? Have you heard the name LeBron James before? Is he like an average player, not so good player, best player in the world? He's the best player in the world, right? Okay. And does anyone know who Mason Plumlee is? He's some punk kid from Duke who was a rookie in 2014. And some rookie from Duke was able to get right in the face, to Josh's point, of the best player in the world and block his would-have-been game-winning shot. Anyone ever seen a basketball player block their shot and the crowd goes wild, everybody gets excited? On Miami's home turf, some punk kid from Duke smacks the ball away from the best player in the world. Could have some momentum effects. Could really be an interesting summation of the story of this game. And Brooklyn won 88-78. So Brooklyn won, an important detail. So let's present this instead of with the jargon. Let's do it in clearer terms that our audience can appreciate and understand. So I might hit you with a conclusion right off the bat because I have your attention, and I might say Brooklyn won by limiting and overcoming Miami's offense, and thus Brooklyn increased momentum. That's the conclusion. Let me explain to you how that happened. Well, first, Miami's star players successfully used size advantage to score close range shots. And then something happened. Foul trouble. Now, I think foul trouble is a key point. I need to explain what foul trouble is, not only the mechanics of what it is, but how it changes the game. I'm going to stop and explain that to you before we move on. You're going to understand foul trouble, and then I'm going to say Miami changed their strategy because of foul trouble, and it's very important to note that they were unsuccessful in this strategy change. One more piece I need to introduce before I get to the conclusion. And I want to tell you that Brooklyn held the series momentum as the playoffs drew near. All that is going to support our conclusion that Brooklyn won by limiting and overcoming Miami's offense and thus increased momentum. Is that a clear way to explain what happened in this game? The most anyone can understand? Lacks jargon? Still has some punch, some effectiveness? Any questions or comments on this? Yes, yeah.
But I feel like sometimes when people use some jargon, there's like excitement with it. Like we take it away, just plain language will lose the excitement.
Okay, sure. And I think foul trouble might be one of those. Like foul trouble, the third quarter, and how it factors into LeBron James, the best player in the world, getting punked by Mason Plumlee and have his shot blocked. That's to your point, maybe that's one place. There are definitely other points. You could have explained attack the paint. But if you're using attack the paint with a lot of enthusiasm, it may sound exciting, but if your audience has no idea what you're talking about, you're going to have to bridge that gap somehow. Okay. Content enhancements. Let's fire through this last part. I mentioned there are some things you can do to spruce up your presentation. I just want to throw them out, discuss them. They don't necessarily have to be for technical presentations, but there's some things you can think about for your presentations that you will be doing next week. We will structure this conversation around the beginning, middle, and end. and think about some things you can throw in to spruce up this technical presentation you prepare for next week at each of those points. Let's start with the beginning. We know that this is a memorable moment to grab someone's attention. So let's talk about some of the tactics we can use to capture that attention. We might start with a startling statement. Did you know that 90% of the people outlive their retirement savings? 90%. We need to get you to be one of that 10%. Or we need to fix this problem because I'm a politician. You might start with a short little anecdote, short little story. What else? What else might we do to spruce up the beginning of our presentation? Quotation. Teddy Roosevelt used to say, X, yada, 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 yada. The late, great so-and-so used to say about the music industry. It's not what you know, yada, yada. Some quotation that may prove your point. Question? Let's see. What's an intriguing question I can start off with that would perhaps give you an idea of my presentation, give you an idea of my conclusion? Do any of you know how many rats there are in New York City? And I might tell you, there are 40 million rats in New York City. You might say, oh my God. We've got a problem. We need to address this. All right, so there's some ideas you might start off your presentation with next week to get us intrigued. Let's see, middle, as you're getting into exploring or stating your conclusion, you're definitely going to give us some facts. We want to know that you're talking about something that is real and supported by facts. Obviously, we need to hear your opinion. Not necessarily obviously, but we do want to hear your opinion because you're the expert. We want you to make sense of these facts for us. Maybe you can tell us a joke. Maybe you can make some of these facts funny. Maybe you can tell us a longer story. Notice at the beginning, for the beginning tactic, I said anecdote. Anecdote is a short story, just a short little, this happened on my way upstairs. Somebody said, why can't you be more polite? And I'm a communications professor. So let me tell you about my content. A story might be a more in-depth story about me having bad communication skills. And some examples. When you're doing your presentation next week, you may give us some examples. As we get to the end, we know that this is a memorable point when we can reinforce our important conclusions, our important takeaways. Here are a couple of tactics you might use. Signal the ending. Okay? So if you do not signal the ending, why would I say? Why do I want you to signal the ending? Do I, Natalie?
So people can begin to start paying attention again?
Yes, of course. If you do not remind your audience that you're about to get to the end, then you're going to lose that upswing on the graph of attention, retention, freedom.
I think also the key takeaway that you're going to mention at the end, they'll know that it's coming up, that I'm going to walk away from this room.
Yes, so signal the ending because they know you're going to reiterate the key takeaway. Restate that main point, key takeaway, refer back to the opening. So at the beginning, I told you 90% of people outlive their retirement savings. And I've shown you several ways how you can not be that 90%. Complete the circle going forward. So let me show you this vivid, positive picture of you being that 10%, what your life could look like. Isn't it great? So please come and give me your check. Next steps. You've got the audience. I've seen a lot of speakers do a great job explaining something to the audience, get them excited, and then waste that opportunity to encourage next steps. Now, salespeople almost always do it. Just the silly example I gave. I've explained to you retirement savings. I've explained to you a vivid, positive picture of what your life can look like. So let's do this right now. Or let's get on our website. Look at my plan for this. Do something because now I have your attention. Don't waste an opportunity to explain next steps. Any additions, any comments on Okay. All right, so let's do two things. Let's do a number of things. First, let's talk about your technical presentations that are going to be due next week. Then, let's take a break / take 20 minutes or so to get with your group and think about how you want to do your team presentations, incorporating any of this stuff and finalizing any details, and then we'll do them. So, first, let's talk about technical presentations next week. All right, so you can look on page 7 of the syllabus. I've got a rubric, a lot of these things that I went over in class. I'd like you to, actually before I get to the rubric, what do I say? I want you to create a presentation 5 to 7 minutes in length, approximately 10 to 15 PowerPoint slides. Yada, yada, yada. I've got a list of things on the rubric I want you to include, most of which we went over. Think about a good template design, customize the template with a header footer, use some powerful headings, insert a picture. Who asked me if I liked pictures? Yes, I like pictures. Insert a picture. Use entrance effects, use transitions, use the triple L transition strategy, come up with a powerful opening, a powerful closing, think of some thoughtful content, and an overall organizational pattern. Now this can be a presentation on anything of your choosing. I showed you an example of a resume PowerPoint slide a student did in previous class. You could present your resume with a PowerPoint slide. You could tell us about something you do for work. You could tell us about something that's important to you, just as long as you fit these elements in it. Find some data, make a graph. I've asked you to build a graph just for this presentation. Don't paste a graph in from somewhere. Actually insert the data, play with the bar chart, pie chart, see what works best for your presentation conclusion. Any topic of your choosing. Does anyone want to ask about topics? Is this a good idea, not a good idea? Yes?
But the graph that you're talking about, not every topic would need a graph to represent it, right? How strict are you about the graph?
I am strict about the graph, and it's worth 3 points. If you don't have a graph, you don't get 3 points. So that's the short answer to your question. I feel like you could choose a subject that needs a graph. I might take slight issue with your point that like we could do a thought experiment right now. You could give me an example of something, and I bet I or someone else in the room could come up with a rebuttal and say, well, what if you had a pie chart that showed this?
Let's say the resume or presentation.
Yeah. Yeah.
What kind of graph can you envision showing for the resume?
You could have increasing levels of management. So when I started my career, I was managing one person. Now I'm managing 3 people, so an upward trend. You could have the amount of revenue I'm generating for my company. You could have a number of skills. You could have a pie chart showing this is, more than half of my jobs have involved management skills. A small slice of the pie has involved quantitative skills. You might have to be a little, I guess not, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not strictly quantitative, it's more abstract in the way you construct it. But still, it's something that visually informs your audience. Okay, other questions?
About any topic, so if you have you can research something and present it, or
Yeah, absolutely. You can research anything and present it. I suspect it would be something that you're somewhat familiar with. I'm not going to require you to research a topic that you know nothing about and start from scratch. Something that interests you. And I do ask that you make it an original presentation. You may have given a presentation on this topic similar. Please do not use those slides. Use brand new slides that you create yourself and PowerPoint slides that you create specifically and a graph you create specifically for this presentation.
This question is just in general. How many slides do you think is a good amount for your typical presentation? Like I've heard people say 10, some people say 20. I'm just trying to get a rule of thumb for general
30-minute presentation. I would say as many as you need. If you're talking about a lot of technical things, you might need 50 or 100 slides. If you have that many slides, you might need a system where you can get through them quickly. In the presentation I just gave, notice that some of them were repetitive. They were different. They were the same slide but presented a different way, so you might click through those fast. If you're presenting a lot of dense information and you have 100 slides with a different thing on all of them, your audience is just going to be like, oh my god. Less is generally more. Helen?
I want to say, because the presentation time is very limited and you can pick some very important things to present to the audience, and if the audience cannot understand, and you can put the data to the appendix instead of the slides you want to present.
Great point. If you feel like you have too many slides, you can put some of them in the, or some of the data in the appendix, and you can refer to them if you get questions. So you might have, in a 30-minute presentation, you might have 20 slides that are your core slides, and if you get questions on specific details, you could use Helen's strategy of referring to the data in those slides. But it depends. Yeah. I'll tell you if you have too many, I'll tell you if you don't have enough. Other questions? Okay, great. So then let's talk about the logistics of how this presentation is going to work, because I made an adjustment due to our snow day. So in terms of the grading, I will grade you based on this rubric, based on your PowerPoint. I will click through your PowerPoint and check, did you do this, did you do this, did you do this? If you did all those things, you get 20 points. Your actual presentation, where you physically, verbally give it to the class, will not count on your grade. That's just for your benefit, your chance to practice. So having said that, I would like to do at least a couple presentations next week. And then we will not only do presentations next week, but we will also do whatever our topic is. I think it's emails. So we'll do a couple presentations just so we can look and we can think, is that too many slides? Is that too little? Did the speaker use the transitions? Was there jargon? Just a chance to ingrain some of the stuff. And then we will quickly move on to emails, memos, text message, social media. And you actually have a case. Yeah, I want you to read the Dell case and be prepared for that discussion next week. So there's a lot next week. So how I'd like to do it is I'd like to get 2 volunteers to actually do their presentations next week. And those 2 people can do their presentation and we can discuss it just like I talked about to reinforce these ideas. Everyone else, you can submit your presentation. You don't have to submit it next week because I know there's a lot with this change. You can submit it sometime between now and the end of the quarter. And in terms of actually presenting it, we will fit it in at the end of other classes, or you can find me, we can do it during office hours, or your 4th option is to just not present. You just want to submit the PowerPoint and not actually do the physical verbal presentation. That's an option for you. I'm not going to pretend that's not an option, it's just a reality of scheduling. So, if maybe I could get 2 volunteers of people who actually want to do their presentation next week. Helen? And who else? Yep.
Present the topic on the page 6.
On the PowerPoint.
This one?
Yeah. The technical presentation. So you'll have your PowerPoint slides. You will submit them on Blackboard. I'll pull it up for you, and you'll stand up and you'll give your 5 to 7 minute presentation, and we'll talk about all the things we talked about in class today. Anyone else besides Helen would like to? I understand. You don't want to get yourself in over your head, but keep in mind, if you don't volunteer now, you may not get this opportunity. All right, Yang. Okay. All right. So Helen and Yang will present technical presentations. Everyone else, submit it whenever you can. And if you want to actually do it, then we can do it at the end of other classes, or we can do it during office hours. So let's take, all right, let's take 20 minutes, but a firm 20 minutes. At 3:10, take a little break, get refreshed, meet with your team, and put your team draft presentation on a file that I can come around with a thumb drive and copy, and then we will start with the first group at 3:11. All right. See you in 20 minutes.
Yeah, I think it's right to the back. Yeah.
Oh, can I see this one?
Sorry?
Okay, we can go back.
Sure. Do you want to present it next week or just?
I don't want to present it,
Yeah.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that my online starts.
Okay. Yes, you can just email it to me. Don't submit it over Blackberry because I'm not using it, great, but just email it to me and say, this is out.
Yeah,
Sure.
thank you.
I'll just get a soda and be back.
I don't know why. I couldn't find a place or something thinking of Blackpool.
Maybe we want,
Yeah.
Yeah, we're trying to.
No, they didn't.
Email it to me.
Yeah, but just before class.
You know, it's not late. Kind of take whatever you need to do, or take whatever time you need to do. Yeah, but can you submit it over Blackboard?
Usually can. Usually there's like assignments. I'll ask other guys that kind of do.
And if you need a couple days to figure it out, don't worry. But just when it's all there, I can give you your feedback and go directly in your grade book, and it's all there.
I'll find that out.
Okay.
whole time. We usually don't get to see you guys unless it's nighttime, night class.
I think it comes out to US.
Really? With Goldman? See, that's how you gotta show up too much. Alright, so. Is that your baby?
No, my niece.
Oh.
Why are these things blowing cold air?
That's how they keep you awake.
Maybe it comes from the outside. Oh, yeah, it's a little hasty going.
Must go too lucky.
Actually, quick question. Just looking at the slide, I find it a good slide. Yeah.
It might be a little slow when you get it up on
This was my kind of approach. Exercise. This is more like
It's almost like you have, where you're gonna be able to see from this is an example.
one word.
Motivation.
Yeah, it's okay.
One word, 2 words, 3 words. Some good comments on her class participation.
Oh,
Yeah,
I sent you an email as well.
I got your
Oh,
I got the email. Just
Okay.
glanced at it. When are the press do you need any materials? Do you need the, you have your copies?
But also at the same time, I think it's just showing that everything
Oh.
is not.
It's like what, 3 in the morning in China? Yeah. So you can watch the videos for class 1 and class 2, and there's a process of comments. You can just watch the create slides, and you can send 3 or 4 comments.
Maybe there'll be something that jumps out.
And let me know if you
Something
have any
like
questions.
small, like how big, like you just say, yeah. Yeah. They know what's surrounding that. And I think what I would say, you know, well, you know, the 2008 was a downturn, but look at the, just
Which industries have the highest increase or lowest increase? For the increase, where is it?
hardware.
I'll tell you what. This is just saying what they spend on social media. It's not saying this is the whole. No, that's maybe they took it away from other. Exactly, I'm saying, that's why I don't think that's what I'm correct.
Yeah.
What I was saying is it's funny, so that this company spends so much money during the financial crisis. I don't think that's.
One.
Trusting card
So in that case, the whole 12 months will be the master class that we got. This one is also something that
You find it,
what's the reason for that?
Every time I do the calls, I try to check from the research. Make a PowerPoint.
Huh?
You need to make a PowerPoint, right?
Yes. Up to you. But it's only gonna be like a couple minutes, because I need to just, you're not gonna be last week or this week? The banking stuff, he doesn't post it yet. So I don't even know my answer right now, either way. Why you go back to China? So next week,
I'll see if I can pull some strings and get you to present fast.
不是有那个考试你还是得来吧，不能没考。
Yeah, the next class, they come up here fast. Yeah. Big Vegas was up, we left early the first class, but then last week around. Rush right in. Jessica, yeah. It's actually been a treat doing a full-time MBA students, because I normally teach just the part-time, just at night. You just can't really drag that on. It's necessary. It's like 8:45 and you're just droning on. There's just so much pressure to be done a little bit early. I get a little
We're
bit
at 17 minutes.
Is that?
Oh, I just texted you. Yes. We just want to have an idea about
but I can't.
Oh, okay, sure.
You go to
From the
completely open to ideas, I just think.
配合没有是第二个哇，没有是对啊，两个 slides 搞定。每负责前面的配网，负责前面点，负责后面，其他都是
Maybe this is a side by side if something changed, like proportions of trust.
So that is one pie chart for EA.
就是因为这几个Chinese spending 最少的，就是 compared to the other industry，它把 advertising spending，是最少的。我来自这个，然后这个介绍词是说，它的
Okay,
so
you just want to simplify.
是最少的。然后后面这个就介绍到就是percentage change 最大的，然后这两个 percentage change 最小的，你就把这个几个主要数字和它 present 一下就好了。答应都是。Aaron。OK，我的小名也当完了。Girl。然后你们有还有想看顾客家庭吗？这样子，这个table，然后可以再加点graph，然后再加一个 conclusion。我可以负责 conclusion，我也简单说一个 conclusion，然后你可以负责 table previous conclusion。那就挺爽，也就简单
Ready? Go back. Alright. Guys ready?
Yes, one is still missing one.
Wait, no, yeah, file.
Oh. Oh, is it okay with this one? First slide, the markup. It's gonna be interesting, 'cause I just don't know how you can possibly do that. Picture for 3 minutes. It's really hard for me, without becoming like redundant and saying, here you can see, like another, there's a line, there's a line. Here you see 80, here you see 60, there you see 40.
Oh, meaning like it would only take one?
Well, for me, because I'm probably too precise.
Alright, well, we'll see.
That's probably not, okay.
For me, like I said,
right, I'll take that as a yes.
That was the smallest.
The biggest, yeah, biggest spending.
The infrared pointer. Yeah, there's two. And this is forward, there is forward, back. And then you use the infrared pointer, infrared dot. Alright, so let's go ahead and grab our seats. The first team is going to start. What's that? All right, let's save it. Do it, Frank.
Right? Is it just two people who need to be present?
1, 2, 3, 4, whatever you want. Minimum of 1.
He already took the whole file. Force us to.
So maybe the trend is that virtual. They are.
Right, we gotta go. You guys say
You got a point. How do you say that?
Everything. Two people can present because there are two
Josh, do your team have a file ready?
Just a minute.
Oh, you have one, you have a dozen?
Yes.
Oh. If you do that change, let me just change.
I don't know what the changes to it.
Especially,
Okay, social media sites. Try to broadcast this. Broadcasting.
Yeah. I mean, the
All right, team one.
On social
the
website. At the
nine.
second slide, the first slide. You want this slide? You want to do that? So, basically, we'll talk about the techniques. You got it? The first one?
Okay, everyone grab your seats, please.
I think people in this. People in this got all know it.
So I was just saying, like, that as you know, the difference.
Exactly. So when you say as you know, so you're not.
All right, team three, you can grab your seats, please. And Levy, you can keep working on that. Just don't talk during the presentation. Or if you're going to be spaced forward. All right. Fire away.
Hello, everyone. Today we'll be presenting some technical data based on 1 month advertisement spending on social media sites by industry. As you can see, we've highlighted some of the large swings that we found in our data set. We noticed that entertainment had a high swing, and as you can see on the dates, this has to do a lot with the recession that was currently going on at that time. We feel that people were, that avenues such as Netflix were starting to market to people since they were home. So a lot of people got laid off during that time period. We also noticed a big switch from telecommunications as being one of the largest spenders to web media. We think that has a lot to do with the fact that sites such as LinkedIn and Facebook were starting to market to people also who were laid off and at home, and so that spending went up.
Okay, thanks Natalie, and now I'm gonna go to tell you what's this data gonna help you make a decision as an advertisement agency. So here is the percentage of each industry, and as we can see, telecommunication and web media, they both kind of contribute 20 to 25% of the total revenue, so they have to be our target industry for as an advertisement agency. And then entertainment, the top 5 contribute about 80% of the total revenue. So this will be our target industry, and we'll say the rest of the 5 or 6 industries are too small to sway our attention now, and that will be our main goal is to define our target industry, and secondly is trying to relocate our capital and resources. Then, does anybody have any questions?
Good. Excellent. So let's see. For this assignment, we want to analyze the given data and present a valuable, insightful conclusion to your fellow MBA candidates using Excel graphs as necessary. So what do we think of their accomplishment? Did they present a valuable and insightful conclusion to us? How well did they do that? What was their valuable and insightful conclusion? Anyone want to take? So you just heard a presentation. What was the conclusion? All right. So we're confused. We don't know exactly what the conclusion was. I have some ideas of why that might be. On the first slide, if you could go back to the first slide for a second. I think Natalie just threw 3 possible conclusions at us. 1, because of the recession, entertainment goes up, and because social media is increasing, a large spending, and because, I forget what the telecommunications was. So right off the bat, we get 3 broad area conclusions, which I think is a bit much for a short presentation like this. I would rather see just 1. And then when we go to the second slide, if you can go to the second slide, please. I feel like Yang changed gears on us. she said, we need to talk about our target industries. And so it's just so it's almost like a whole different presentation. So I feel like there's a lot in this. And I don't mean to pick on this group. This is the point of the exercise. There's so many different traps in this exercise for you to fall into. Oh, this is interesting. This means this. What if I look at percentages? What if I look at raw numbers? And they just did a good job of falling into a few of those traps. And I think because of that, it wasn't as effective. How do we like the transition between Natalie and Yang? Did you use the label, link, or lead method? She actually said, do you have anything to add? Anything else you want to say? Not here, present that important, impactful thing, or explain that next step, or reinforce my one central point. Or, Yang is going to explain the numbers behind this one valuable conclusion. I think would have been helpful. What do we think of the choice of graph? We've got a bar comparison, and it's all based on percentage of the whole. Like those 10 industries add up to 100%, right? So yeah, Priya.
I tried this one, and it was one of the suggested ones, and I didn't feel that it was portraying the right sort of distribution. So we went back to the regular bar graph.
Yes.
Because this is a percentage, and everything is taken as like 100%.
Yeah. So what was Yang's conclusion at this, or what was her main thrust in this part of the presentation? It was, and I think I'm understanding this correctly, was that the two largest percentages are where we should think about our target market. So if that is her takeaway, do you think this is the best choice of graph? What might be a better choice of graph?
I think maybe a pie chart is better.
I think a pie. Let's look at the two big pieces, and the comparison. I think the 2 months. Maybe that adds to the confusion. Maybe she could have just done 1 month for the pie, for the 10 pieces of pie, and then let's look at the two big ones because they stand out. It looks like we've got 2 big pieces, 2 medium pieces, and the rest small. So I feel like it would have stood out. Yeah. Any other comments? All right, we're good. Like I said, there's a lot of traps here, and it's not meant to be perfect. But thank you for taking a stab at it. All right. So team 2. Yes, you're team 2. This, you could go blank screen if you want. Forward, backward, using the infrared pointer, red thing.
Alright. Media class. It is like, how do I So,
okay, everyone, focus on the presentation, please.
So our presentation is on advertising, spending on social media. And then here's a table where we compared the 2 years on it. And then we found that the entertainment increased the most, I think 12%. And the second followed by travel was 365%. And the other ones are, their health increased by 143%. So those are like the main, the top 3, I guess. I know, actually business 183.4, and automotive 178, and then travel 365, and then entertainment 812. Those are the top 4. And then the one at the top 4 is probably 5 or 6. So I'm going to give my pen. Okay, the second slide, I'm comparing 2008 to 2009. So as can be seen from the chart, telecommunications, the amount of money it doubled from 2008 to 2009, And then it seems that what media also more than double, because the difference, it seems like it's more than double. And then now we're gonna give our conclusion. And then I'm gonna hand it out.
Thank you, Jared. After Jared's explanation for the data, we can get some conclusions from those data. And the first conclusion might be, we can see if we go back to this chart, we can see there is a trend in advertising spending on social media sites. We can see that, let me see, the telecommunication, if I remember correct, the retail goods and the service experienced the least increase, which is about 55% increase. And this second one, if I remember correct, the entertainment experienced the most increase is about 812%. And the second trend we can see is we can maintain and retain the top 4 industries, which are entertainment industry, live media, retail goods and services, and public service, because they take up 78% of the total advertisement spending on social media sites in August 2008, and about 70% of the total advertisement spending in the same month in 2009. And the third thing we can get from these figures is about we can improve our services and facilities to encourage 2 new industries to invest in more money, to spend more money to the social media sites, because we can see the entertainment industry, it increased 812% the advertisement spending, and the travel is about 400% increase.
Okay, excellent. Comments for team 2?
Just go back to the table. Sorry to critique something. What I would have just done, you were trying to point out on the table, you're trying to point out the 4 with the most changes. I just would have sorted it by, put those ones at the top, not sorted it alphabetically, so that doesn't mean anything to me. You can try to point that out.
Yeah, or highlight. I think Jerry just gave us about the top 4, top 5, and just walked them through. So why not put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? But let's stay on that point. Actually, we'll come back to that point. Other comments? How did they do in terms of giving us a valuable, insightful conclusion? What was their conclusion? All right. So I asked this question a lot during this exercise, and I get crickets a lot during this exercise, and it's tough. It's tempting to list a lot of data and not accent the 1, maybe 2 important takeaways we want. I think this group started out in the table, if you could go back to the table, Ellen. I think it started out with Jerry just listing the top 4 or 5. So where's he going with this list? Is he trying to prove a point with this list? Is he just pointing stuff out to us? Okay, so he has our attention, and he gives us the top 5 growth industries. And then something interesting and confusing happened on the slide. Can you go to the next slide? So what does this graph show that the previous table really did not show? I'm sure there's lots of answers to that question, so let me just tell you where I'm going with this. This graph shows raw numbers, and the previous table showed percentage increases. To me, that was the most confusing thing to their presentation, that you went, at some points you did percentage increase, and at some points you did raw numbers increase. And so it was really tough for me to try to consider what point you were trying to make when you were going back and forth. And I think you need to take a direction. You can say, all right, the biggest percentage increase is what we need to focus on. These are growth industries. If you invest $1, it'll grow by 800% or whatever you might have wanted to conclude from that. And there's a whole different way you would frame the conclusion if you're going to use the raw numbers to back it up. And I feel like, yeah, so we started talking about percentage increase, and then I think Helen even continued talking about percentage increase. Is that right, Helen? You talked about percentage increase. Go back to the table, or the bar graph, excuse me, forward. So she was talking about percentage increase, but what stands out is this part right here, because we see the large raw number. And what doesn't stand out is this entertainment. Like, didn't anyone even notice this till I pointed it out? Like, oh, look at this tiny little blue one, and then the big orange one. If that's the conclusion you want to make, then you need a different graph. You need to show the percentage in a different way, or just maybe show this part, I would say. Would you all agree that's fair? All right, so the back and forth between percentage and raw, and how about using the tape method to overview this? I think, what happened? Jerry, did you introduce this graph? You introduced the table, and then you introduced this graph, and then you transitioned to Helen for the percentage, or for that conclusion. Yeah, I wanted a tape method, so I'm trying to get my head, even though we're familiar with this data, because I've seen it 20 times, you all have seen it 5 times. We still need a minute to think about what they're trying to say. So tell us the title, tell us the axes, and we can orient ourselves, this is raw numbers versus percentages, and tell us the key takeaway. And I would also point out that I think going through that process would have helped you formulate what your important takeaway was. And by going through the title and the axes, you may have even realized, hey, wait a minute, we're talking about raw numbers here. And on the previous table, we were talking about percentage increases. So maybe that's going to be confusing. Let's change that. So just the process of preparing to present using the tape method, I think would have helped. Any other comments? Ending. Oh, Helen's ending. Can we notice how she ended?
No ending.
She just ended. And then she realized it was over and said, oh, that's it. So she missed the opportunity to ingrain that one important conclusion. But good job. You gave us a lot of things to talk about, and I hope that exercise was helpful for you. So good work. Team 3. You just put the thumb drive in and
We're going to show you today the trends in social media marketing spending based on the industry. So we have accumulated data that shows monthly average spending on different industries and the data gathered, and it's comparing data between 2008 and 2009. So here, as you're familiar with, coming from the business school, the difference between tangible and intangible social spending. So this graph talks about tangible versus non-tangible social marketing spending, and it's comparing, like I said, 2008 and 2009, the spending in those 2 years. On the x-axis, it shows you the different industries that the data has been gathered from, and on the y-axis, it shows you the raw average the raw dollar value that has been that they have spent every month on advertising. Based on what you see here, the red bars represent the dollar value from 2008, and the orange one is for 2009. Irrespective of the industry that you see here, the average spending in 2009 has been more compared to 2008. And if you just take the raw dollar values here, there are two industries that sort of sticks out. The first one that I'm going to talk about is the entertainment. In 2008, it was this much dollar value, and as you can see, that they have really went up quite a lot in their dollar spending on social media advertisement. And the other extreme that I want to sort of emphasize here is the hardware industry. And they haven't actually, although they have spent a little bit more compared to 2008, but they haven't spent a whole lot. And what that data means, I'm going to pass it over to Justin, who's going to talk about what this data means. What kind of insight can we take out of this data?
Thank you, Priya. With our findings, we have found a very apparent, very obvious trend. As Priya has pointed out before, on the whole, the dollar value of money spent on marketing has increased all across the board. However, that's not to say there's no variations across industries. The two industries that we circled are the two extremes of the spectrum. On the one hand, as has already been pointed out, entertainment has increased dramatically, almost about maybe 4, 5, 6, 7-fold. And hardware, and this is actually a little bit cut off, it's hardware and electronics. And these are primarily products that come in the form of actual tangible products, something you have to find in the store, and the marketing method typically doesn't entail a lot of virtual marketing. It still requires a person to go into a store and take a look at the properties and the features of the products themselves physically. And if you look at other industries, you'll find that the industries that have seen extreme increases, both in terms of dollar value and also in terms of percentage, are the ones that entail a great deal of virtual marketing and virtual communications. These include web media on the far right, telecommunications, public services, and so on. And some of the little or smaller industries that have seen maybe not a great deal of dollar value increases, but a lot of percentage increases, such as travel over here, software. Now you notice that they're small, but do not let this indication, these bars, mislead you in any way, because the percentage increase is still very significant, comparable to that of entertainment. And you'll find that both travel and software are industries that involve a lot of virtual marketing as well. So those are the general trends that we have discovered. And for our conclusion, I'll pass it on to
Okay, so just very basically, just straight to conclusion. Our conclusion is as follows: the greatest increases have been in intangible products, or greatest increase in social marketing. So that's the entertainment and web and media and stuff like that. And the smallest percentage increases have been in tangible products. So that would be your automotives and your hardware and electronics. Thank you.
Good. Excellent. Comments for Team 3? How do we like their conclusion? Yeah, tell me about their conclusion. When did we get it? How was it supported? How was it presented? Yeah.
I feel like that started a conclusion when Johnny was there, like the second half of Johnny's explanation. I started a conclusion. I think they Priya mentioned or have a conclusion at the beginning. Because I was wondering, why is the title is tangible versus intangible when you're talking about raw data? I've been continued wondering that thing the whole time when you're doing the presentation.
Yeah, I think that I didn't really understand tangible versus intangible until Levy came up and said this is, intangible products are entertainment, and tangible is stuff you can tell. Was anyone else confused by that? Yeah, I heard you say before, like they should know what that means. Is that what you're referring to? Tangible versus intangible.
Well, we were saying that with jargon, so I was saying that.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like it confused me. It's like, how are you using tangible? And I just didn't get it until the end when Levy, when you pointed it out. So I would say that their conclusion, the way I would have focused their presentation is based on what Levy said at the end. He came out and said, here's a simple, clear conclusion. We've got the most increases in intangible and the least increases in tangible. I think that should have been the starting point of their presentation. And I think that would have focused, they should have started and ended with a clear statement like that. I think the other stuff confused us. Zhenning started talking about this virtual thing, and I thought, oh, okay, we're getting to a conclusion, but I don't think he really explored or supported that. And I dare say that Priya just listed data for us. Is that a fair assessment? She just listed data for us, and we really weren't sure where she was going with it. And I would encourage you to frame that in terms of, all right, we're not just going to list data, we're going to tell you the conclusion. Maybe tell us what it is. And then when you start giving us that data, it supports that conclusion that you, the smart MBA student, gave us. But I feel like that your section was just a list that we really didn't know what to do with. And we found it at the end with Levy's clear, simple conclusion. And that's what I asked you for in this exercise. It's just that clear, simple conclusion that we can clearly understand and we can support with the data. So I feel like this group, you're almost there. If you just started with that and then used the data to support it, you would have been right there. Any other comments? Yes?
I really like their PowerPoint, and also like they highlights the 2 points they wanted to talk. And I think Priya actually did a good job explaining the raw data. She did the title and the axis. So I like a lot of people.
Okay, yeah, I want to talk about both those. First, I like those circles, but let me point this out to you. Think how much more valuable it would be if we knew their conclusion. If they could have said at the very beginning, we're going to tell you about how intangible industries grew exponentially and tangible products did not grow exponentially. Look at this. Here's the intangible. Look at how much that grew. Look at this. This is the tangible. Look at how much that grew. So it was helpful that it was circled and we had an idea where they're going, but if we knew where they're going from the beginning and they just used this to support it, then it would have been that much more effective. And the second thing you said was?
Explain the raw data, actually with the title, the axis, and go through the data.
Yeah. And I think what I said before is if we knew where she was going with this, it would have been more effective. Remember in the first class, I said if you give us this data without giving us the conclusion, it's like giving us pieces of a puzzle and we don't know what the big picture is. So we're listening to this piece, wondering how it all fits together. Now that's okay if we pay attention to you the whole time, we don't have anything else to do, we don't have anything else we want to think about, we're enjoying this, but if we have some other things on our mind, limited attention, not familiar with it, it's so easy to lose us if we don't have that big picture where we know where you're going. Okay, so I think we need to clear out of here. We're all set for next week. I will see you then. Get home safely.
The only way I want to do is keep stuff like
Yeah. So you just have to submit it based on the format and
I regret that. I already had
Questions about the
Yeah, yeah. Oh, sure. Absolutely.